Hello, everybody. This is Everyday Buddha interview series number 14. This is a series of interviews with my spiritual friends, teachers, and compadres. And my name is Eddie. And today's guest is Dr. Todd Pressman. And I took a course with him called Deconstructing Anxiety. This was a certification program, which was pretty intense. And I wanted to ask him about his background, but during the course, I didn't have much chance to ask him about it. So I just invited him so I can ask him other questions outside of the course material. And Dr. Pressman is a psychologist, author, and speaker. And he's also the creator of the Deconstructing Anxiety method, a new approach to healing, not just anxiety, but the root cause of suffering. And his working model is based on Michelangelo's ideal to release the statue from the stone, authentic self from the overlays of imposed identity into the discovery of freedom, joy, and fulfillment. Well, thank you and welcome.
Very nice to be here, Eddie. Thank you for having me.
So, of course, I want to talk about deconstructing anxiety itself. But before I get to that, you have a unique background about, especially I want to hear about the world tour, the world traveling you've done, went to Japan, Bali, Mumbai, Sri Lanka. So I want to start from that journey. What motivated you to go out there to study all those wisdom, from all over the world before you got into psychology?
Shortly before, I was a senior in college, and I saw a brochure on the lunchroom table that said, semester at sea, go around the world and get college credit for your classes. So who would want to pass that up, right? Wow. But it was a remarkable experience. And I had not yet committed to psychology as a career, but I certainly had a passion for psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. On the semester at sea program, you could choose your courses. I had lots of religious studies courses and anthropology courses and so forth. And to my great benefit, the professors would lead tours once you were in port. So I became very close with my religious studies professor, and he had a friend who was a former teacher who was a Zen master in Kyoto. We spent time with him, and that was remarkable. He was showing us around the monastery, Ryoanji, the famous monastery with the rock garden that a lot of people might know about. And he said, in that rock garden, you would meditate to appreciate the fact that there's no one place you can sit and contemplate the rock garden where you would see all of the rocks. There was always a piece of at least one rock hidden. So the monk or the student was to meditate on the fact that there's always a piece of reality hidden. And we have to have that beginner's mind that says, I don't know what I think I know. And there's more to appreciate and become receptive in that way. I also was fortunate with the same professor to meet with a Zoroastrian high priest outside the fire temples of Mumbai. And he was a magnificent man with big long beard and the white frock and hat, and he really looked like something out of the Bible, but full of love and presence. And he was busy teaching us that the Zoroastrian creed is to do good in thoughts, deeds, and actions, and he embodied that. So that was his path to spirituality, and very beautiful man. Sri Lanka was also extraordinary, where we witnessed authentic fire walking in the jungles. And I talked to the firewalker afterwards. In his broken English, he was telling me this was a secret and sacred tradition passed down from father to son through many, many generations. And, it was their way of discovering vaster human potentials and so forth. It was a remarkable journey, and it grew me in very profound ways, showing me what was possible in being human.
Okay, and then there's Bali.
Sure. Well, Bali is worth talking about because I had hired a driver, some friends and I from the the program, semester C program, hired a driver, a native Balinese person who took us all around the island. And one time we were sort of just driving through the countryside with beautiful jungle on either side. And we were lulled to a kind of sleepy state because it was just so peaceful, and this long, slightly bumpy ride. It was like a hypnosis by itself. But all of a sudden, our driver got very excited and said, "Oh, I've only seen this 2 or 3 times in my life." And as we pull up, we see a group of people off to the side of this dirt road, and there was incense filling the air and drumming and lots of intense, excited energy. And we got literally within 5 feet of the 2 men who were making sacrifice to their gods. This was the Hindu tradition, mixed in a little bit with some Tamil tradition. And these fakirs who were making sacrifice in a way that was, well, perhaps a little bit hard for a Western stomach to grapple with, but they were having thick metal hooks dug into their backs. I was literally 5 feet away. I have a photo that shows it, while they were in an ecstatic trance. And their bodies were quivering with this kind of ecstasy. Their eyes rolled way up into their heads. The drums are going, the incense is going. And someone grabs the rope that is attached to these metal hooks, and they start running in a circle around the person holding the rope so that there's tension on those metal hooks. Again, hard for a Western stomach to hear, but there was no blood and no sign of pain. I literally watched as the hooks were being dug in. They prepared the back with a little bit of white resin, but that wouldn't stop it from bleeding, of course. And there was no evidence of pain. They were literally in an ecstatic state. So that was pretty remarkable as well.
I lived in Indonesia. That is a place that being in trance is not that unusual in a sense. You might have seen little girls dancing or kecak, or the guys, sit in circles and play the drumming and kecak, and they all go into trance. So I can kind of see, I haven't seen the hook thing, but I know that kind of thing happens also in India. Those sadhus and pierce big needles through their mouth or different things, and there's no blood, and they don't seem to be in pain. So it's amazing that you actually witnessed that 5 feet away.
It was remarkable, and you can't get the same experience by reading about it or watching it on TV even. The energy was just palpable and infectious. It changes you to be part of that energy field. It was quite remarkable.
Bali is one of my favorite places on earth, and mainly because the whole place is like dedicated to God. The mountain being the main temple of the whole island, and everything, the whole life, human life, is dedicated to God. The singing, the dancing, the paintings, the carving, and food and offering and flowers, and everything is dedicated to God. So just feel good being in Bali and just meeting those people, very genuine, smiley, wonderful people, very artistic. So what was your impression of Bali outside of that remarkable thing that you witnessed?
Well, I could say that one of the descriptions I heard when I was there that really captured the feeling of Bali was, it's the land of 10,000 temples. I'm sure you heard it as well. And I don't think there are probably exactly 10,000, but it's a small island. So that indicates there are a lot of temples, and they're everywhere. Beautiful temples with this very unique architecture. And in front of each temple, there is always plenty of food offerings that people bring for the deities to absorb the essence of the food. They don't obviously take the food away, but the essence of the food. And as you say, it's just part of everyday life, and almost every moment of everyday life, where they're thinking about their higher source and higher aspects of what it is to be on this planet and what's going to come afterwards. And I think that is probably what accounts for the feeling you described, which I also felt. They're very sweet, loving people, no sense of the kind of, if you will, tense competition that we feel here in America, perhaps.
Mhm.
They I think have much more of an appreciation of being in the present moment with lots of flow and
Mhm.
um, appreciation of, I could say, simpler values, but really an appreciation of the interaction
Mhm.
between human nature, spirit,
Mhm.
our, I think, in my opinion, more approximating more closely the original way we were supposed to be living. We've gotten a little bit far afield of that in the
Mhm.
West, and causes a lot of our troubles. So I think they are as a whole, of course, this is a generalization,
Mhm.
happier
Right.
than people who have more material wealth, for instance. That
Right.
was some experience of Bali. There's so much to say. I did experience the Ketchic monkey chant ritual. It was
Mhm.
absolutely remarkable. They're chanting Ketchic, Ketchic, Ketchic in this extraordinary human orchestra, right? Vocal orchestra. It's
Mhm.
integrated and counterpoint upon counterpoint, and they're doing these movements, and again, shaking and quivering, and infectious to be in that energy field.
Mhm. So back to Japan. So did you spend most of the time in Japan in Kyoto?
We went to no, we went to Tokyo. It's where we arrived, and then we went to Kyoto next. We went to Nara. We're stretching my memory. This was quite a while ago.
Right.
Um, that may have been it, those three. And
Mhm.
Nara, of course, is famous for the deer park where the deer come right up to you and they
Right.
don't mind if you pet them and whatnot.
Mhm.
My fondest memory of Japan. It's really the incidental moments that capture the experience of the place.
Mhm.
Was yeah, we saw all the sights, and Ginkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, was spectacularly beautiful, just crazy beautiful. But one of my fondest memories was, again, traveling around with some friends and happening upon first a grocery store, very different than in the West. In America, we saw the octopus and shrink wrap and some other things that we couldn't identify. And we're just going around the aisles, poking everything and having such a good time with that. And then we bought some lunch that we could take with us and found a little park to eat it in. And then a beautiful park again with just the magnificent Japanese landscape and the bamboo. I don't know what you would call it. The water from a little stream that runs through a hollow bamboo tube, and the bamboo tilts when the water becomes heavy enough and makes a beautiful sound on the rock, which is a
Mhm.
great tool for meditation. And
Mhm.
then we heard some children's voices not too far away, and we followed the sound. And there was a class of some martial art. We didn't know how to identify it. And
Mhm.
these adorable little children learning some wonderful discipline and talent that would evoke not just the ability to perform a martial art, but a spiritual evocation as well. It was beautiful to see these innocent children who are also embodying some kind of real mastery and um, masterful presence. It just struck me in a profound way. I never forgot that.
So were you able to actually sit in that Zen garden and meditate?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, at Ryoanji?
Yeah, Ryoanji or any other temple,
Yeah,
in.
we
Mhm.
did. We sat on the benches that are designed to look out at the rock garden, and the sensei said that the monks, of course, meditate on the rocks, but also they're raking the pebbles between the rocks in certain very meticulous patterns. And that is a big part of their practice, to be fully immersed in the present moment as they're raking these pebbles. And he told us a story of one monk who was raking the pebbles day after day after day. And after 1,000 days, he said, one pebble caught in the rake in just such a way that it flung off the rake, hit the wooden fence on the other side, made this sound, and he had his enlightenment as a result. So it's that constant repetition and practicing being in the moment that causes an awakening eventually.
Were you a meditator before that trip?
Well, I was pretty young at that time, 22, and I can't recall if I had started meditating. I was a fanatic of the Carlos Castaneda books. I remember that at that age. And I don't remember. I was reading some interesting books on spirituality, Swami Muktananda, great Indian saint, and some of the scientific explorations of spirituality, like the Tao of Physics and the Dancing Woolly Masters. These books had just come out then. I'm dating myself, even though they're old classics by now. So yeah, that was I had started my studies by that time with Stanislav Grof, who is considered the father of transpersonal psychology, great man. And he originated the technique called holotropic breath work. You may have heard of, I'm not sure. It's a way of doing fast, deep breathing with your eyes closed, lying down, and listening to very powerful, evocative music that opens up consciousness in a dramatic way to experience higher states and go through profound healing. And you really can have wild transpersonal experiences with that technique. So that was a big part of my practice back then. I'm not sure if I was meditating per se. Meditation has since become a very important part of my life.
If I remember correct, Carlos Castaneda, didn't that involve some substance, peyote or something?
Yeah, and he was found by a Yaqui Indian named Don Juan, who was coming from now I'm trying to remember, the Toltec tradition, I believe. Yeah, that sounds right. Again, many, many years since I've read that. And he was, according to Carlos's report, an extremely advanced, well, they called them sorcerers. It has a funny connotation for us, but extremely advanced spiritual master, and quite amazing stories, right? On all those Castaneda books. There was some controversy about whether they were true or not, but it's not hard for me to believe they were authentic. Yaqui tradition involved the use of peyote, and I don't remember if there were any other plant medicines used, but it didn't depend on that. Don Juan would regularly put Carlos into an altered state in different ways. I remember one interesting story. He invited Carlos to look at a mountain way off in the distance. Carlos was already in a bit of a trance because just being in Don Juan's presence could do that. And it was Don Juan's intention for him to do that. And he's looking at the mountain, and he sees this very bizarre shape moving across the mountain, this huge shape. And it's moving in a peculiar way, and it seems to have a life of its own. And it was almost an ominous being, as Carlos described it, when suddenly Carlos snapped out of that altered state and saw that Don Juan was holding a little bit of fabric right in front of his eyes, and had sort of hypnotized him into seeing it, perceiving it as this otherworldly being floating across the mountain. Don Juan got very upset with Carlos for snapping out of the trance state, because it's not a matter of whether this was really a piece of fabric or there was a being out there. It's reality, he was saying, is what we make it, and it became very real if you let it. So that was an example of not using plant medicine to help induce these other experiences.
Have you experimented with any plant medicine?
In a way, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I have not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're fascinating, and I think that the awarenesses that they can bring, if done in a super respectful way. I don't like the idea of doing drugs recreationally. I think that the spiritual experience and teaching they can bring is important, very important. So I've studied them at length. Stan Grof, again, one of my significant teachers, did some of the original. He was the primary person, I believe, who did the original work in LSD psychotherapy back in the 1960s when it was first discovered. LSD was first discovered.
Mhm.
And some of your listeners will know that it was not LSD that was the problem. It was when the press got hold of it and focused in on certain rare cases where it was mixed with impurities and it was not done in a respectful way, like a psychotherapeutic setting, the way Stan Grof was doing it, that people had their trips that evoked unresolved issues for them, and there was no set and setting to help take care of it. So they had bad experiences, which could have been wonderful experiences if they were used in a therapeutic way to help create healing and transformation. So Stan Grof, LSD then became this illegal substance and all this hype around it. Stan Grof discovered, this is an interesting story, that when people would come out of their LSD experiences, they were starting to come out of it, they would naturally start to breathe very quickly and deeply. Controlled kind of hyperventilation.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a spontaneous thing. They weren't told to do it or they weren't trying to do it. It was just natural. And Grof was already using this highly specialized music that's very evocative. So he thought, when LSD was no longer illegal and the research he was doing, wonderful research, people can read about it in his books, LSD Psychotherapy and his other books. The research was shut down because LSD was now illegal. Mm-hmm. He started doing the same thing with that fast, deep breathing and the music. And this became his technique called holotropic breath work. Now, I have not experienced LSD or other psychedelics, but people who have say it replicates the experience of 150 micrograms of LSD. Wow. So we don't need the drug. We can do it just with the breathing. And if you think about it, that kind of fast, deep breathing is a natural mechanism that we all go through or experience when we're very upset, right? Very excited. Mothers do it in giving birth. Babies do it, all over the place. It's just like, I'm excited, energy's coming through me. I have a lot of breathing going on. So there's something about that. I did my dissertation on this, actually, something about the fast, deep breathing that opens up consciousness in significant ways. Very, very important tool.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go to Mumbai.
Sure. Well, we didn't have a whole lot of time with him, but the time we had made quite an impression. Again, he was such a big presence, just exuding energy and almost a kind of reverential feeling to be in his presence, but super loving, very kind, big smile on his face. And the first thing he told us, kind of with pride actually, was that Zoroastrianism, of course a very ancient religion, was the first to come up with the idea of monotheism, one God. And I said to him, wasn't that Judaism, which is what I'd always been taught? He said, no, we predate Judaism. And he told us about the creation story in Zoroastrianism with the two deities, first Ahura Mazda, the good guy, and Angra Mainyu, the bad guy, the god of evil. And they had a war in the heavens. Ahura Mazda, the good guy, won and subsumed Angra Mainyu, so that there was really only one God now. And that has interesting implications if you ask, well, who created those two gods in the first place, right? But I don't think Zoroastrianism, as far as I've understood, deals with that. I have an interest anyway in creation stories from different religions and teachings around the world, so that was kind of fun. But then he took us to where his temple was. They call it the fire temple. Fire is the primary symbol in their religion, symbol of purification, original light, right? The source of life and warmth. And we were not allowed in the fire temple. Only if you're a member of the faith can you be in the temple. But we could see these beautiful little chalk drawings on the sidewalk right in front of the temple. And I have a picture of that as well. Hope that's not a tease. The drawings were symbolic of different aspects of their faith. And I can't really pull out any memories of detail about that, but they were just these beautiful little creations that gave us a little bit of it, anyway, a sense of what might be inside the temple.
And then fire walking, that's Sri Lanka, right?
Well,
Tony Robbins, but
yeah,
that's
but when I often show these slides and I say this was authentic fire walking deep in the jungles of Sri Lanka, not like a Tony Robbins workshop. This gentleman had studied his lifetime and there is a secret book, again, passed down from father to son through the generations, where they study this book, and it's a book for learning to expand consciousness and enter this altered state. Firewalker was also doing a very powerful, wonderful trance dance before the fire pit. The drumming was going, the incense was going, and he was building himself up into a feverish pitch with this trance dance to get himself ready to enter the fire pit. He wears these teeth, part of a costume that look very big and scary, which he called devil's teeth. Again, in the West, we think, oh, devil, bad, and all of that. But for him, and this is an important principle, he was identifying, he was embracing his fear and the power of fear to transform it into an ally. So he wasn't afraid of the fire. He felt powerful over it, or maybe with it. He also, in his costume, had this headdress and skirt made of straw, dried straw, long strands of straw. When you see the pictures, you'll see he's stepping into the fire pit, scooping up coals and washing himself in the coals. There was no burning. There's a picture I'll show you where he showed me at the bottom of his foot. There's lots of ash, but no blistering at all. The other remarkable thing is that his outfit of straw did not catch on fire. Highly flammable stuff, right? Now, the other thing that's interesting to tell is that Western scientists like to poo-poo these things, right? And they came up with an explanation for why people can walk across burning coals. I forget the name of it, but it's the idea that there are little beads of sweat at the bottom of their feet, and they walk so quickly across the coals that the heat doesn't have, the sweat acts as a protective barrier. It's a silly explanation, and it doesn't hold up because, again, you'll see in the slides, this gentleman, after he finished his trance dance, for the first part of it, he took a big leap into the fire pit, landed with a thud, both feet, stayed there for several seconds, then scoops up the coals and washes, pours them over his head. The last thing to tell is that they threw a piece of salami or something, big piece of round meat, onto the coals, and it instantly sizzled very loud. So you knew this was hot. There was not any kind of fake experience of pretend coals. It was quite hot.
Salami was not in trance state.
Right.
So this was not an audience participation like Tony Robbins. So you saw the guy, but you did not participate walking on the pole.
Years later, I did a workshop to walk on the coals myself twice. And it was a beautiful experience. I've never taken a Tony Robbins event, but it was an absolutely beautiful experience where we're standing in a circle around the fire pit, and the facilitator walks first. And there's something about that opens up your own consciousness, because you see this thing that's not supposed to be possible happening in front of your eyes. And it was, for me, not at all an intellectual but it was something that woke up inside of me. I felt it, that said, this is possible. I had entered the field where this was a possibility. And one by one, we were invited as we wished to walk across the coals. I just waited till a few people, not many, had gone through, and I felt an invisible hand push me from behind, gently, nudging me, letting me know it was my time. It was an invisible hand, not a real person. As I walked across the coals, I felt my heart chakra, if you will, just burst open, and a beam of energy rushing out of it, going over my head, behind my body, under my feet, and back up. So I was in this bubble. I experienced being in a bubble of energy, and that was what protected my feet from the coals. So again, no burning of any sort, and just a blissful experience. It was absolutely wonderful.
Did you have any preparation before you started walking, like the drumming or kind of getting to the trance chanting?
They had plenty of drumming, but I'm glad you asked the question. I usually say that I think it's very significant that the preparation was just a little bit of discussion about what would happen, nothing overtly obvious beyond that. What happened that prepared us was, again, the expectation we were going to do this, the excitement that generated a field of new possibility for all of us, and then watching the facilitator walk across. That was the final sealing of the deal that made us know we could do it. Yeah.
All right. So any other countries or any other tradition that you studied, anything that you want to mention?
Sure. I mean, we went to 13 countries.
Oh, wow.
Egypt was quite mind-blowingly wonderful. When we went through the Valley of Kings and Queens, where the pharaohs were buried in their tombs. When I saw the brochure, right, at my undergraduate college for Semester at Sea, it was called, that was the picture that made me say, I've got to go. Seeing the picture of one of the students inside the tomb in the Valley of Kings. And, you're walking into the earth, literally. First, it's this vast kind of desert, just nothing but sand everywhere. And you see these little holes, which are the entryways into the tombs. And you wonder how the archaeologists could have possibly found it. But it was humbling to see that these pharaohs had been buried in this huge, vast expanse of desert. We also saw the pyramids of Giza, same feeling, like these monuments, magnificent colossals, which actually makes me think of other things we saw in Egypt, these colossal statues. You've seen pictures of them. That's when you're in there at the foot of them, looking up and feeling just so small. That's already a spiritual experience. But then you go into the earth when you're in the Valley of Kings and Queens, and you leave civilization behind, and you're immersed in this sacred aura of the bridge between mortality and immortality, earth and heaven, which is why they, of course, built these tombs and the pyramids. They were trying to be immortal, but gorgeous hieroglyphics all over the walls. Nothing much to see in terms of the sarcophagus, just a stone structure in the shape of a person or a mummy. All the mummies, of course, had been removed, or a wooden coffin that's beautifully painted and so forth. We did see King Tut's tomb, which wasn't more interesting than the others, except that he's so famous because he was very young, and they found the tomb intact with all of the riches. Most of the other tombs had been robbed. Grave robbers found them before the archaeologists did. So that's why it got so much notoriety, but that was fun as well. Went into Queen Hatshepsut's tomb, very different than the other. There was a big temple surrounding it. I'm having fun telling you these stories and reliving.
I'm having fun. Yeah, listening to that. what a great thing to do, you know, a whole semester traveling around the world and just go right into the most spiritual, most interesting, most intriguing part of the culture, just, you know, from one place to the next.
And the other nice aspect of the Semester at Sea program is they design the courses. It's a full array of liberal arts courses, but when possible, they design them to, they tailor them to prepare you for what you're going to experience in port. So again, religious studies courses made an obvious connection. Anthropology course I had was great. That professor had traveled the world widely and told some great stories. But the one course that everybody took, I think it was mandatory or at least strongly encouraged, it's called the core course. And it is a series of lectures that cover different aspects of the country you're about to visit. The economics, the politics, the political and the religious and the geographical aspects of it. So it was, and then people would come on board ship once we landed in port and give us a presentation of their dance or their art or something like that. Arthur C. Clarke was a guest speaker living in Sri Lanka at the time. Yeah, 500 students and 150 Taiwanese crew members. That was a great part of the experience as well.
Let's see, any other country that you want to put in? Because I want to transition to deconstructing anxiety.
Sure.
But, you know, it does seem like, you know, there must be more interesting places. So
India, and I had been there once before. Of course, it's just a spiritual heartbeat of the world. We didn't have a whole lot of time, but the Taj Mahal is more than you can appreciate in the pictures or the movies. It's a monument, of course, to love. The Shah that built it did it for his wife. It's all marble with this gorgeous inlay of jade and other precious stones. Again, it was about the emanation of the vibrations of the architecture, the beauty, the testament to love. Another aspect of it was that there was a river behind it. And we saw, which is not uncommon in India, that was the only time I saw it, a floating body going by. So, you know, just the extremes of life and death and spirituality and quite a lot of poverty as well makes quite the impact. We went through Delhi. The bus we were on went through a central square that was so filled with umpteen thousands and thousands of people, all poor, crowding, you know, in this marketplace area, that the bus couldn't move.
wow.
And you just see the massive humanity and the suffering people go through here. And, you know, we're insulated in this bubble of a bus, which I did not like, but wasn't safe to go out of it, obviously. Again, India is such a land of extremes. One of my professors on the program, who'd been there many times, said, India, it's the land of jasmine and poop. Delightful smells and then not so delightful.
So we can move forward, and then your transition from that trip to major psychology and to develop the deconstructing anxiety method. You can tell us a little bit about that part of journey.
Sure. I probably was influenced just a little bit in terms of my interest in psychology and consciousness by my father, who was a psychoanalyst, and his teachers were students of Sigmund Freud, and my mother, who was a social worker, and both of them had a very active, lively spiritual interest. So that probably influenced me a little bit, but it was in my adolescence, before all of this adventure, that I started asking the questions, you know, why are we here? Who are we really? Who am I? And what's this suffering all about? Because I had a very wonderful childhood, I'm happy to say. And growing up and seeing the bigger world was difficult because it didn't match that experience where I was so protected and felt such love. So that launched my journey. And I was intensely philosophical throughout my adolescence. I really wanted answers to these big questions. But it was later when my father began his spiritual search and started sharing some of what he was reading and discovering and so forth, that I started reading the same things, and we went to conferences together. So that began my spiritual search. When it was time for college, I found, first I tried philosophy, but it was too abstract and kind of got lost in the weeds as far as I was concerned. I thought psychology really is a better approach to understanding some of these questions and what to do about the human condition. So I majored in psychology, went to psychology graduate school. It was really the spiritual search built on top of some of the solid foundation that psychology provides, that helped me come to some answers. A better way to say it, and this is the truth, spirituality gave me answers. Psychology gave me a way to talk to a more general audience about it, because I don't think there's really a separation. It is a matter of peeling away the layers of the onion. And in the search for understanding ourselves psychologically, we peel away the onion until we find the spiritual self, or if you're Buddhist, the no self, right? So psychology, the principle of exposure therapy, i.e. facing your fears, that's really important in traditional psychology. Well, you can't dismiss Freud's awareness of the unconscious. That was just a revelation that changed the world. We didn't even know there was an unconscious before that. So that's important. But exposure therapy, facing your fears to discover they're not real, they can't do what they threaten to do, that's important from Western psychology. Otherwise, it's spirituality. And my spiritual search was heavily influenced by A Course in Miracles. Biggest part of my background that shaped my thinking. You have love and you have fear and nothing else, right? Anything we suffer from has fear at its root. That's basically the cornerstone of the deconstructing anxiety model right there. Deconstructing anxiety uses a combination of insight into the unconscious and exposure therapy to say, here's the fear, the core fear at the root of all of our other problems. And as you know, Eddie, in the deconstructing anxiety model, there's one core fear, just one belief set based on fear that is responsible for all of our suffering. That's golden information, because if we can get our hands on that, we have a real tool for making change in our lives. We don't have to say, well, there's this problem and this problem, this problem. No, there's one problem. And the solution, as in the deconstructing anxiety model, but also as an exposure therapy, is to move through that fear in various ways rather than defend against it. That just makes it seem real, like there's something real I'm defending against. Move through it, face the fear all the way, and look back and say, I'm still here. It didn't destroy me the way I thought it would. It's not real. It was a perceptual illusion. All kinds of things from A Course in Miracles filtered into what I'm saying here. But if we put deconstructing anxiety in a nutshell, it's a process for finding the core fear, the one thought that's responsible for all of our suffering, moving through it in ways that are unique to the deconstructing anxiety model, but they involve facing the fear, moving through it all the way. Because you're moving through the core fear, the root of it all, you get to the other side and say, it didn't hurt me, and you can't have fear anymore. There are no more layers to discover. That is the root of it all. So that's where I think the power of deconstructing anxiety comes in. Lots more to say in terms of how we move through, how we can do it safely, gently, and reliably, where regular psychotherapy averages only a 46% success rate in treating anxiety, for instance. This, in theory, has the potential. I'm doing research on it, but I don't have the results yet. In theory, this has the potential to erase all of anxiety because you're moving through the core fear, the source of it all, and saying it wasn't real. Now there are no more forms or variations on the theme of our core fear that can still scare us. We've uprooted the problem at its source, as I say.
When I saw that as Deconstructing Anxiety, because I take seminars for continuing education as a nurse practitioner, the reason I decided to take it is Ken Wilber endorsed it. So just that one word, Ken Wilber. And he says something with his in theory with the 4 quadrants. So he talks a lot about psychology and spirituality. And at one point, I think he mentioned that psychology can only take you so much, well, current psychology. And then they can take people up to a certain point, but then leave the rest to spirituality. So he described it that way. So with that in the back of my mind, when I saw the description of the Deconstructing Anxiety, so I thought, oh, you are one person trying to bridge the gap between psychology and the spirituality. Although it didn't say it that way. As you say, it has a potential to relinquish suffering more than 46% if you can get through the fear, or if you can get through the small self and then connect with a unified consciousness, then the suffering is illusion. So that's really connecting the spirituality and psychology. And you try to do that. I really like what you said. The spirituality is your purpose or motivation, and psychology is the means to, get to that, take people to there. So I can see that you have this big mission. And I'm kind of part of that. And the reason I do this interview is part of that, my mission too. I know you're teaching seminars and you speak and you write. You've written, a few books, but do you also still take clients?
I see clients 1 day a week, and I'm getting busy enough with the seminars and speaking and writing that I'm not really able to take on new people. But my mission, as you say, is to help people learn how to do it themselves with the seminars. I designed it as a self-help program, and I found that a lot of mental health therapists are very interested in it. So I was able to give continuing education credits for it, as you said. And mental health therapists have become the largest part of the audience, but I'm hoping that it reaches a more general audience more than it has. And people who are just suffering from anxiety, depression, stress in general, I think can take this and make it work in their lives. As you know, having gone through it, the training to be able to lead others or help others with this program requires doing the work on yourself. So a lot of people are surprised when they think they're a mental health professional taking it for continuing education credit, that I make it so experiential. And I think that's the best model for supervision anyway. We have to do the work on ourselves, right? The calendar for what we'll be doing in 2022 just came out, and there are some new offerings. Deconstructing relationships, applying the model to relationships program, which is, I was calling it Destiny by Design, how to live with purpose, power, and passion. And then I realized just this morning, I better change that title to make it more acceptable for the traditional folks that are going to give it CE credentialing. So something about purpose, a la the Deconstructing Anxiety model. So yeah, it's widely applicable, right? Because we're working at the source of any problem. You can have this discussion in any context and find it to be meaningful.
So anybody can take the course, as a self-help course. And there are a fair number of mental health professionals as well. So they can, if they want to, they can take as a CE course or wants to be a certified practitioner as well.
Sure. If they're already on a spiritual path, then I hope to give them a new avenue toward accelerating their growth. If they're not on a spiritual path, I can talk about it all in traditional psychological terms and getting the spirituality, right?
like that.
You can talk about spirit as
Mhm.
consciousness or
Mhm.
awareness. And if people say, well, I don't believe in spirit, I just believe that I'm a body and a mind. I have to be able to, touch it and see it or taste it or what have you. I say to them, you can't touch, see, or taste thoughts, and we know they're real. And then there's something that is the matrix inside of which thoughts exist called consciousness or awareness. There's an observer that's choosing the thoughts to think, right? So we're not just the thoughts and the body. There's this thing called consciousness. So that's a nice bridge, right? And the mindfulness model is super helpful because we know it's Buddhism, right? Packaged in a way that Westerners can relate to. So
Mhm.
we don't talk about Buddhism sometimes, although John Kabat-Zinn, who originated it, says this is Buddhism, and I'm a Buddhist practitioner. But a lot of people like to forget about that or pretend they don't know about it.
Right.
So we can say, it's mindfulness, all this wonderful research behind it now. And you don't ever have to talk about spirituality. I think
Right.
it's a useful service to make that bridge, as you say.
And John Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness, and more meditations, binaural beats, different meditation practices, yoga. I think it's great, the whole thing with the internet. Overall, I think this information is spreading little by little, and then more bridges are appearing between psychology, spirituality, and what else is available, like walking in fire. You see somebody walking on fire on call. Roger Bannister, who ran the first 4-minute miles. So like, oh, he's doing that. Oh, she's doing that. Maybe I can be free from suffering, free from anxiety.
I love that you said that, because this, by the way, is exactly what the Destiny by Design, which I'm going to rename, program is going to be about. So after we've released or transformed our anxiety, the core fear, and we have this opening to a much vaster fulfillment. And as you know, there's a process called vision questing for designing that fulfillment and getting into action with it in very powerful ways. Then we want to focus on what I call creating the field of enlightenment, where, because we see Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile and so forth, many, many other crazy, wonderful examples that show the reach of human potential, and the fact that it's only a belief in our limits that say we can't achieve this goal or realize this potential. If we create that field, a morphogenetic field, as Rupert Sheldrake called it, where it's possible, and this person does it, and this person, and this person, then all of a sudden we can do it. Exactly that. That's what that program is about. I'm really excited to be offering that for the first time.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then you can create a community of the graduates and stay connected until we reach the critical mass, and
Yes.
then just kind of spread like fire around the planet. Now, would that be nice? Yeah.
There we go. We share a vision, you and I.
Yes. Thank you so much, Todd. And it was so much fun. And
It was a
I
pleasure.
can hear more stories, but I think we'll end here for today anyway, maybe some other time. And take me through other countries sometime. Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again soon.
Thank you for your good work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye now.